What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they are one day through minicamp, and there is plenty to talk about. There is a wide receiver who we might have to start hyping up and are very excited to start hyping up. Meanwhile, Arthur Smith addresses the quarterback competition, and there is definitely something to talk about there. And one of the biggest names in the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room was not present for the start of minicamp, and it was not Cam Hayward. We'll dive into our reactions to that. It's a beautiful day here in the Berg. We head back to the South Side for day 2 today. How you feeling, my friend?
I feel good, and especially because I thought, kind of going into this week, I was like, okay, this is basically just another week of OTAs. Not much going to happen. We've been through all the storylines. We don't need to talk about anything new or anything different about the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. But no, they gave us plenty of stuff to talk about. There's lots of news, lots coming out of the first day of minicamp. That's the other thing. It's just the first day, and they're packing a big punch before they head for the summer break.
Yeah, it was exciting yesterday. Way more than we expected to come out of it. And to be honest, it wasn't a bunch of headlines. It wasn't a bunch of guys talking. It wasn't anything crazy. It was coaches giving us some insight that we haven't had yet, which is obviously a major upside to getting to talk to position coaches and Arthur Smith and everybody else this early in the offseason, and kind of allowing us to dive into what we speculated about and them confirming a lot of things that we either hoped were true or believed were true. We're going to start there. Yesterday, the media, you were part of this. You were part of the scrum. Talked to new wide receivers coach Zach Azzanni for the first time. He had plenty to say. He hyped up George Pickens in the wide receiver 2 competition, but there was a name that stuck out to him that he tossed out there as a guy who's definitely impressing, and that is Calvin Austin. Quote, he's been outstanding. That's a guy who's gone from here to here in just 8 weeks. Oh, you wrote this and you said that he moved his hand.
He kind of did he's gone from here to here. It was kind of hard to come across when you're just writing it out. But
no, I got it. When I'm reading the quote, I'm looking at it, I'm going, that's a lot of words that are not in quotations. Here we go. Continued the quote saying, it's been really fun to watch. He's a worker. He's intentful. He's urgent. He wants to be coached, and you could see it because his game has done that. You were in the scrum. You obviously saw the hand motion that I could not read in a quote. What were your thoughts from him, and what did you take away from that on how Calvin Austin has somewhat developed and become a guy that maybe we should start talking more about?
Yeah, I'd say first off that I'm pretty excited, and I have been pretty excited to watch Azzanni kind of do his thing at practice these past few weeks. I think he's young, he's energetic, he's really knowledgeable about the position, and I think really detailed and just kind of intense. He's really up guys' asses, quite honestly. And he said that in really no uncertain terms yesterday when we were talking to him. Said it in the context of George Pickens, said in the context of Roman Wilson, said in the context of everyone that he's kind of a perfectionist, and so he's going to demand a lot of guys. And I think Calvin is the kind of guy who really responds to that. Calvin, I think, knows how important the details are, especially for him, a guy who, I like Calvin, but let's face it, doesn't have the same kind of physical gifts that a George Pickens has or a Jamar Chase or any of those, top wide receivers that you're thinking of. So he's got to work a little bit harder. He's got to be a more detailed guy. He's got to know the ins and outs of the offense. He's got to know where soft spots are in every defense. He's got to really be a technician with his routes and be really detailed in that way. So I think he's really responding to this. And I think for the situation that Calvin's in, Zach Azzanni is the perfect coach for him. And you can see that relationship goes the other way too. Azzanni sees a guy who is working so hard, is so focused, is so singularly focused on being good this year and becoming a part of the offense, making an impact in the NFL for the first time, that he's really responded to that as well. This is kind of a great relationship for the both of them. And I'd say none of this is surprising. I think we all knew that Calvin was a hard worker, that he's genuine, that he, accepts coaching and takes coaching and all of that. But it's just good to hear that that's actually turning into some progress. It's stuff that I think you thought you saw on the field at certain times that you were able to say, wow, that was a nice route by Calvin Austin. He just, beat Cam Sutton up the seam and was open even if he didn't get the ball, or, he's his route running's getting a little bit better as he goes through these drills. His footwork looks really impressive. He's battling, competing for contested balls, and while he's blocking too. You kind of thought you saw that stuff, but like you said at the top, it's good to have coaches confirm that to you because they are, at the end of the day, the experts. And Azani giving him some praise, calling him, shouting him out, saying, this guy has been one of the standouts of practices so far, I think was really encouraging, especially given where Austin sits in this receivers room where there are a lot of questions and a lot of unproven guys.
Yeah, I agree. I've watched Calvin Austin and you've watched Calvin Austin, and we've talked about how he looks better. For a little guy, he looks a little bit bigger, but he's still very little. But there's a lot that goes into that. And you expect a guy to take a leap. And this is essentially his second season, which is massive. This is not a guy entering his third year who hasn't put it on the field in 2 seasons. Last year, he took a step forward by the end of the season. He was more impactful by the end of the season. This year is the year where you look at him and go, Calvin Austin could hopefully make a name for himself. You got to figure it out. But I also don't think that he fit into what the Pittsburgh Steelers were doing last season, and I think he fits a lot more into what they're doing this season. He's a deep threat for Russell Wilson, who loves the deep ball. He works well with George Pickens, who could do pretty much everything. He could work on the outside. He could work on the inside, just like you said. He could be explosive. Last year, Naji Harris was like, yeah, Calvin could work in the backfield if you need him to. He could work everywhere, and they didn't utilize him anywhere. And I'm not saying that they're going to. I'm just saying I trust Arthur Smith's offense and the new developments that have come more than what I trusted in Matt Canada's offense last year to utilize Calvin Austin and his skill set in better ways. I'm excited because Calvin Austin is a guy that if you're going to talk about wide receiver twos, which is tough for a guy that size to become a wide receiver two, but if you're going to talk about wide receiver twos in Pittsburgh and where the most potential is at that position, Calvin Austin is that guy. Roman Wilson eventually could be that guy, but he looks like a third-round rookie. He doesn't look like he's ready to be a star in Pittsburgh yet or take over a starting role. And yesterday I was asked on the podcast on live stream, do I expect him to start day one? I said yes. The more I sat there at practice yesterday, the more I kind of thought, maybe not. Maybe it's Calvin Austin, and without question, it's Calvin Austin. And I feel that's where I stand today. Calvin is a guy that if he does emerge and continues to take steps forward, that's somebody who could be the next, I don't want to say George Pickens. There's a significant gap there. But the next big name wide receiver in Pittsburgh that emerges alongside George Pickens with plenty of potential.
Yeah, and I think, when you think about who's going to benefit the most from Arthur Smith and the new offense and a new scheme, a new play caller, I think obviously, Naji Harris and Jalen Warren kind of top that list. I'd say Pat Freiermuth is pretty close behind, but as far as skill positions go, I think Calvin Austin is up there a lot too. I think Smith's going to bring some creative looks. He's going to find creative ways to get Calvin involved. And for a guy who I would have no doubt that Calvin is going to know this playbook like the back of his hand by the time training camp comes around. He's going to know everything that he needs to do. He's going to know every assignment. He's going to know every kind of permutation off of this offense as well. I think he is going to take full advantage of what Arthur Smith is going to give him. He's one of those people that I'm looking at. I not only is it year 1 to year 2, but it is a new offense that I think is going to be able to use him in much more efficient ways and much more consistent ways than he ever has before.
Yeah, I agree. And look you talk about nice guys. You can talk about people to root for. That's the other side of this is there's nobody in that locker room, literally not one person in that locker room that if you are a fan of guys who deserve opportunity, who are just genuinely nice people, and that's who you root for, Calvin Austin tops that list. But hands down, tops that list. He's
if there was anyone else in that locker room who had been asked to talk 6 times or whatever
at least
over
minimum.
the course of the past 3 weeks, they would lose their mind at some point, and they would snap at someone. Calvin Austin has gotten that and not done it, so I have no problem hoping for good things for Calvin Austin. Don't think anyone else should either.
Agreed. Moving on from the offense, moving on from the wide receivers, Arthur Smith talked yesterday. The first time since the NFL draft that we got to talk to the new offensive coordinator. There was a lot said, but for the most part, everybody was mostly concerned with the quarterback competition between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and where things stand. And Arthur Smith was very open about it. He did not hold back at all. He said, quote, Russ is in pole position, which it's a competition, and I think we all knew that. continued to say, obviously, we get to Latrobe. I mean, certainly, I'm sure things will heat up, but both these guys knew that, however, they were acquired and they got here. And I think it's been pretty transparent. If you were there, if you were listening, I know that the quote itself is, what does that mean? Essentially, what he was saying, or at least what I interpreted, was this is a real quarterback competition. Russell Wilson gets the first opportunity to start. Russell Wilson's going to get the opportunity to prove that he deserves that job because the Steelers think he deserves that job. But they're not going to hold back from Justin Fields, and they're not going to stop him from competing. They're not going to make this Mitch Trubisky versus Kenny Pickett versus Mason Rudolph. I don't think it's the same gist. And you could disagree with me if you think, but I look at it and say Russell Wilson does have the advantage, but they're not ruling out Justin Fields, and they're going to continue to see if he's the guy that really could be as special as maybe he was believed to be when he entered the NFL 4 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree too. I think this is kind of a repeat of the company line, which is that, Russ is our guy for right now, but, he's not completely safe. He's still got to earn this spot. He's got to prove that he can be a starting quarterback, that he's good enough. It's more just kind of doing your due diligence, I think.
Yes.
And it's obviously, it's impacted by the fact that, if Kyle Allen was your backup, I don't think we're having the same conversation. Like Justin's talent level and his, previous experience does play a factor here. But this is also, having been in the scrum, like listening to the way Smith kind of delivered this answer, it sounded like he was mostly like, this is what Tomlin wants. This is what Tomlin has told us. And we're not going to fight him on this. Whether or not he agrees, not entirely sure, but I think this is pretty much just saying this is coming from the top, is kind of how I read between the lines a little bit. I think Smith is kind of hearing what Mike Tomlin is telling him, saying that, look, we like Russ. Russ is the leader, but we don't want him to feel comfortable. We want to continue to push him and for him to push himself. And Justin is kind of the perfect guy to do that. It's someone who Russ is, I think you would feel safer with Russ. Definitely. I don't think there's anyone out there who wouldn't feel safer with Russ just starting under center, but at the same time, Fields has this level of talent that's kind of undeniable. And even if you're Russell Wilson, even if you were told when you signed, yeah, you're the starter, we're going to go into training camp, mini camp with you as our presumed starter. There's still kind of this looming thing behind him. You can't be comfortable if you're Russ. You still have to push yourself. You still have to be really detailed and everything like that, which I don't think that's a problem for Russ. I don't think he needed motivation or anything, but in addition to, a great fail-safe option, Fields does, keep everyone motivated, keep everyone on their toes. It keeps them pointed in the right direction and continually focused on getting better and some growth.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, for Justin Fields, you're looking at this, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and saying, I want him to feel like he's got a shot and he could prove himself. Yeah. And that's what they're looking for. They want Justin Fields. Everybody keeps talking about, and they've been talking about it since he was acquired. You have to get Justin Fields on the field. You have to see what you get in him because you only get one season to decide if he's your long-term option or not. I think you could decide that partially in training camp. I think you could decide that with how much he pushes Russ, even if he doesn't earn the starting job, because I don't think Russ loses it. I don't look at Russ as somebody who's going to go out and lose the starting job. He looks fine. He looks good. He looks consistent. And that's all you're looking for if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. You want somebody who could come in here, who could be a leader, who could not lose you games and also win you games. And Russ kind of feels like that guy. But having Justin out there, understanding that he has to gain some ground, but has an opportunity to gain that ground. As a competitor, he's looking to gain that ground. He's looking to win this competition. He's not going to sit back and say, well, that's too much ground to give. And quite frankly, I think it's much better than the situation they were in. You want to talk about why they got rid of Kenny Pickett and why they moved on from, or why they were so accepting and willing to go out and acquire Justin Fields, even though Kenny Pickett had 2 years left on his deal, is simply because you could kind of read the lines here and say, Justin was a dude who came in here and accepted the challenge. Kenny kind of probably would have faded back and just accepted that I'm a backup this season and it isn't good. That's what you're looking for because it benefits Russ. And at the same time, you get to see what you have in Justin. You get to see how much ground can he gain? How good can he look? How fierce of a competitor is Justin Fields? I think you're going to get an opportunity if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers to have a pretty good understanding of whether or not Justin Fields is an option next year and moving forward, just from how willing and accepting and how much he puts into this quarterback competition, which I expect him to put an absolute ton into and make it by the end of the season or by the end of the summer. I expect there to be at least some conversation, some debate of, I don't know, man, Justin's looked pretty good and Russ has looked real good too, but maybe they go with the younger option. I expect there to be some conversation by the end of the summer simply based off of Justin's play.
Yeah. I don't know if I completely agree with the Kenny Pickett part, but I think that I think that we do hit on an important part there. And I think you've got to, if you're the Steelers, I think it's kind of important that you make sure Justin Fields feels like he has a future in Pittsburgh. And if you just kind of bury him on the depth chart, if you kind of sink him before he has a chance to really prove who he is or what he can do in this system, I think you fall into danger of maybe losing him down the road. And I think it's ideal for the Steelers to try to keep him in the system, keep him engaged. And part of that is allowing him the space to kind of work and compete for this job. And, just show him that he's like truly a part of the team, that he isn't just kind of an accessory to this thing. So I think that's really important as well. And another reason why it's really smart to keep this competition open for, I don't know about as long as you can. You don't really necessarily need to take it up to week 1, I don't think. But I think the longer you give Fields to truly compete, to truly take some first team reps and show what he can do, I think the more that you can kind of keep him in the system and keep him believing that Pittsburgh can be a place for him to get his career kick started, even if it's, a year down the road or something like that.
I agree. And just like you said the first time, it leaves you with a really good safety net. It leaves you with potentially the best safety net in football. And that's pretty good if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and something happens, because you never know. This is football. Things always happen. But I agree with you. All right. Next thing I want to talk about here. Naji Harris was the only Pittsburgh Steelers player who was not at minicamp yesterday. Cam Hayward showed up. Plenty of action going on. It was an excused absence from Mike Tomlin, but obviously everybody wants to talk about the contract situation and where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand. And is this Naji holding out for other reasons? Should there be concerns? Who takes advantage during his absence? He's expected to be there today. Like I said, Mike Tomlin said that this is excused and that there's really nothing else to talk about here. Are you concerned that Naji was not at practice yesterday? And do you have any thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I was concerned for a minute because this happened beginning of OTAs too. Because I was sitting there, someone says to me like, "Hey, you haven't seen Naji yet, have you?" And I was like, "No, now that you mention it, I haven't." And I kept trying to look for. There's a huge scrum of receivers and running backs and quarterbacks doing like ball security drills, so it was almost impossible to pick anyone out. And I still couldn't see him. And they started doing team drills, still couldn't see him. And I expected him to do what he did at the beginning of OTAs and run out an hour into practice. But he didn't. I'm not concerned. I think if this drags out any longer, maybe I would start to be concerned. I think, I talked about this last week. I think, George Pickens showing up to the last 1 or 2 days, I think, of OTAs was that. Yeah. I can't remember if he was here for multiple days, but he was gone for a little while too. Cam Hayward coming back as well. Like there were a bunch of guys who hadn't been there before. Cordell Patterson, another name. But like there were guys who weren't there for a lot of OTAs that did show up today. And I think you hear from them and it's kind of I felt the responsibility to be here. I think, I think the players can feel that there is something special to this team. They believe in what this team can accomplish, and to them, maybe it's only symbolic, but showing up for these types of practices, showing up, getting a little bit of extra work in, just showing a commitment to the team, I think matters to a lot of these guys. So
yes, I
think, if you're a real believer in that, if you think that that's concerning that Naji didn't kind of participate in that same thing, I would be concerned about it. I'm not that concerned about it. I don't really question Naji's commitment to the team at all. I just think, I think the only question is, will missing 1 or 2 more practices, 3 more practices, however many he does miss over the coming week, how much does that affect, his knowledge of the offense? Like,
Yes.
I think that's really literally your only concern is how many physical reps is Najee getting in this new system? How well is he going to know it? Because I think he's also doing a lot more in the system too. Like, he's not just taking straight handoffs up the middle. Like, he's splitting out a little bit, he's like playing a little bit of receiver. So like there's a little bit more on his plate right now. I think Najee's a smart guy. I'm not necessarily concerned. I'm just kind of running through what possibly could happen, but I'm still not very concerned. I expect him to show up today. I expect him to be fine. I expect him to be Najee. And I think we might be able to move past this pretty quickly, but there are some concerns if this does drag out a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think I sit in the same boat. I'm not necessarily concerned. I don't think it's an issue. I think there are some issues that this drags on to. You know what I mean? You're going to get a portion of the fan base that hears that Najee's not at minicamp yesterday and is upset about it. And, I don't think guys need to talk all the time. I don't think that you need to address certain situations, but we won't as a group because Najee does not talk to the media. He's very anti talking to the media. And we won't understand his commitment or where he stands about the contract situation or really any of that for another month at least until we're in training camp and he potentially has to talk. But even then, I don't think that it's mandated for him to talk. So it might be until the regular season that we hear where Najee stands with the whole situation. That's going to cause some lingering drama. That's going to get guys that overreact on the radio. That's going to get fans that just simply have a bad taste in their mouth for Najee. You don't want that. That's the only concern I think I have is your appearance to the fan base, where you stand with these guys, because it's important. We were Najee defenders a lot last season. We sat here time after time after time talking about how Naji Harris is better than his stats and how he's a very quality running back. He should be the starter. He's the guy in Pittsburgh. We got to stop bagging on Naji Harris because he's explosive and he does all these great things and you need him in Pittsburgh. I feel like there's a chance that we're going to have to do that again because he doesn't have the strong camaraderie with the fan base. And I think he's got to begin to develop that. And again, I think that's more of like a, Najee versus the media thing than Najee versus the fan base. But that's how you get across to the media. Like I think he gained a lot of fans last year when he went up to the podium and called out everybody for talking crap on Matt Canada and the offense. I think there were a lot of people in that fan base that were like, look, I respect that. I like that. And I think with this situation, that needs to be addressed again, especially with him missing minicamp, because you're going to start having a story built around you that isn't real. And, people will push it. And I don't, that's not a good thing because that's going to lead to people like us having to defend Najee again this season when that shouldn't be the case. It should just be his work on the field. And we should kind of be telling it in a Najee is trying to earn a contract type of light instead of Najee is upset that he doesn't have a contract type of light.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point of just, like, Najee doesn't want to deal with this stuff either. Like,
no,
talk about
exactly,
how Najee doesn't like interacting with the media. He has to interact with the media more the more that this kind of stuff comes up. So I think it's unfortunate for him. I don't think it's a situation that he wants to be in.
Yep.
So I think that's the, and like this drama or whatever that we're talking about, like, I think you made a great point that it's kind of him versus the media or him versus fans. It's not really anyone in that locker room who has a problem with anything that he's doing, but
nope.
Like I said, like this stuff affects him. He sees it. Najee acknowledges it sometimes too. He understands the narratives that are out there about him. He understands that some people don't like him for whatever reason. And I think last year he worked really hard to try to, be a leader, to step up, to try to, I don't know, win back some of the fan base, I guess, in a certain way, in addition to kind of make some progress in his own career and make some progress in his progression as a leader. But I think that was also a kind of a way to kind of bridge the gap between him and the media and fans. I think he was trying to show that he was a really serious person, that he was a really serious football player, that he was all in on the team. And I don't know, at a certain point it seemed like there was no winning with him.
Yes.
Everyone was going to be mad at him for something.
Yes.
And so I think that's another thing that you could be concerned about is Najee, just kind of done with trying to bridge that gap. Is he just kind of over even putting in the effort again, we won't really know because we're not going to be able to talk to him for another month probably. I'd be really stunned if he shows up today and is all eager to speak to the media and
No chance.
all eager to spill the beans on what his contract situation is like. So I think we're just going to have another month and a half of endless Naji Harris speculation and takes, and it's not going to be any fun for anyone. I don't know anyone who enjoys talking about Naji Harris like this.
No, I agree. I think that's exactly it. Is it's good for headlines, I guess. It's great for interactions. It's good to get people riled up. For people who just want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and where they stand. And, I'm all for a good headline. I'm all for a good speculation. I'm all for a good, let's get the people fired up because I'm fired up. I'm not necessarily about that when it comes to guys in the locker room who, this has nothing to do with football. It just strictly has to do with everything else. And that's the part of it where I'm just like, all right, let's just, let's not make this worse than it is because it just gets carried away. Nobody enjoys it. And that's kind of where we stand. I don't think it'll change. Just like you said, I think we'll be in this boat for a while. And I hope that there are enough people that are able to just view Naji as a football player, because I think that's what it comes down to is like, it's the same thing with everybody else. Like, who cares? Who cares about it was the George Pickens drama last year and the so on and so forth. Like, this is a new season. Let's just talk football. And when we have to talk other things, we will. But for right now, let's just talk football. And I think that's a place to be, but I don't know if that's where we're going to stay. And heading into the down period, man.
Right. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. There's
going to be some crazy stuff said about Naji. Like the combination of, a couple absences here or there, the contract situation.
Yep.
What he said last year about, running backs and the market value for running backs.
And the media. And then guys getting signed, which he did not.
Yeah. There are going to be no shortage of fantastic Naji takes floating around out there over the month of July, so everyone can really look forward to that. While there's no football, we get to talk about that.
Yeah. One day I'm gonna just go up to him in the locker room and be like, "Hey, pal, look it. I might not always sit here and defend you, but a lot of times, man, we try. Okay, so you could not like a lot of people here. I'm trying, pal. We're trying as hard as we can. That guy over there, Stephen Thompson, he's tried harder than me. So let's calm it down. Yeah. It's gonna be a wild off season. With that said, we're going to head to the South Side for day 2 of minicamp. We're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as we've been saying, please go find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.